The following is a clip from Primo Radical Uncensored, available for premium members on Rockfin. Elon Musk's bid to purchase Twitter went through, so he is now purchasing Twitter and going to be in charge of Twitter. And there are a lot of people on the right who seem to be very happy about this. Many suggesting that Donald Trump could be reinstated, or Alex Jones or other folks could be reinstated on Twitter. And this is really being celebrated as a victory for free speech, especially because Elon Musk kind of pitched his bid to purchase Twitter as being an effort to reestablish free speech. So I'm curious what your take is on that. Should we be optimistic at all? Or do you think that Elon Musk may have had other reasons for purchasing Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what his real reasons are for purchasing Twitter. I think what I kind of take a step back and I look at this situation, and it reminds me a lot of the environment in 2016 when Trump was about to win the election. And that is to say that Trump, like Musk, is a very rich man who appealed to a lot of people in the working class who felt that they were going to be in some way represented or championed by this really rich figure. And I think it's the same thing now, where people think that this billionaire is going to give them free speech. And, you can agree that Twitter and other social media platforms have been rife with censorship. And you can, I feel that it's interesting to see at even the suggestion or the hint that somebody would go against the establishment status quo, the amount of vitriol and hysteria you see from establishment figures, and I don't even like to call them the left. It's more like the neocon center. Mm. And so I think that hysteria is interesting. However, that doesn't mean that Musk is actually there for the little guy, just like it didn't mean Trump was actually going to represent the working class. So, I guess I'm never unhappy to see the establishment unsettled, but that doesn't mean that I think that Musk is honest or a good thing. I mean, I just think that, very wealthy people had, large interest in Twitter before this purchase. Billionaires like Bezos own the Washington Post. Almost all of our media and social discourse spaces online are owned by billionaires. This is an ongoing problem. It's not suddenly that Musk is only the problem because he upsets the central neocon faction. And I think to paint this issue with Musk as the only problem when it exists in this larger context, it kind of plays into the establishment's hands in a way. However, that doesn't make me a fan of Musk in any way. So.
And I mean, also too, when I think about this, like if Twitter was to genuinely become a free speech platform, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it will be successful or have continued success. I mean, obviously it is one of the biggest social media networks, but we've seen other platforms like Gab, for example, that get removed from the App Store and whatnot, and I believe like deranked by Google. Do you think that things like that could happen to Twitter, or do you think because it's already so big that you really couldn't do those types of things?
Oh, I absolutely think that could happen. And after 2016, we saw, Jack Dorsey, and not just Dorsey with Twitter, but also, Facebook, all these different companies being brought before Congress and basically questioned and grilled about why they didn't basically throttle and censor more, and why they didn't, prevent Trump becoming president, et cetera. So I think that that's absolutely a possibility. I think there are a lot of possibilities where, the establishment would hit back at Twitter in various ways if it were to become a free speech platform. I think that I'm not going to believe that that's going to be a reality until I see people like Scott Ritter, Pepe Escobar, and other journalists talking about the Ukraine issue reinstated, and people like them who were obviously censored for having a dissenting voice against the establishment narrative. Reinstating accounts like Trump's, that's less of a real indicator of free speech to me than it is to, uncensor some of these dissenting journalists.
On the subject of the government doing censorship, we actually heard Barack Obama sort of advocating for this last week, saying that, people are being misled and there's a lot of misinformation out there. Obviously, this has been the case with COVID. We actually had an example with the White House with Jen Psaki even saying that the White House was flagging Facebook posts and directing Facebook to remove them.
In terms of actions, Alex, that we have taken, or we're working to take, I should say, from the federal government, we've increased disinformation research and tracking within the Surgeon General's office. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation.
A lot of different social media accounts being taken down recently, which to me suggests that the government must be directing it in some way. You know, when you see this kind of coordination among these companies who are allegedly competitors, and they're all deplatforming the same people at the same time, to me that would suggest that the government is playing some kind of advisory role. But yeah, just do you think that, again, if Twitter was to become an actual free speech platform, that the US government would step in and break it up, or just do some kind of, you know, investigate Elon Musk, or just other things that may try to dissuade them from actually being in favor of free speech?
I definitely think those are strong possibilities. I think, and any other possibility as far as ways, like I said, you know, being dragged before Congress, there are a lot of different ways that the government could retaliate against Twitter if it felt that Twitter was allowing views that threatened the status quo narrative. I think that it's really interesting to see that the government, or, you know, the power structure in the US, let's say, wants it both ways in terms of government interference with platforms like Twitter. They want to be able to sort of in the shadows tell Twitter who to censor, what narratives to censor, but they don't want to then take accountability for that in terms of the free speech protections that government controlled spaces of discourse would receive if that were known to be, you know, if that were made public, if it was, you know, kind of officially a sanctioned government space. And there are, I mean, there's reasons to kind of want that, for it to be completely government run and then become an open space of discourse. That's another way that we could have actual free speech, but that's that's just not going to happen. They want to have, like I said, they want to have it both ways. They want to be able to direct discourse while also hiding behind it being a private company and saying, well, a private company can do what it wants.
Right. And I think this kind of points to Section 230, which we've heard a lot of different conservatives be vocal against, and Donald Trump in particular. Barack Obama actually did also bring up Section 230 during his speeches last week. And so essentially what's happening is these companies are hiding behind it to censor people and act like a publisher, but then also not be held accountable for what people post on those platforms. So I just would be curious in your thoughts on that. Is Section 30 at the heart of this? Does that need to be fixed? And if so, do you have any kind of recommendations or thoughts on how it might be fixed properly?
That's kind of a tough question. I think that I think basically that places like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these other massive platforms, they either need to be broken up with antitrust and recognized as the monopolies they are, you know, along with Google, along with these tech massive conglomerations, or they all need to be put under, you know, state-run ownership and, you know, like I said, free speech rules applied to them. Will that happen? I don't think so. But, you know, as we said before, this is a situation where the government wants to, you know, have its cake and eat it too. They want to be able to control things while not being responsible for controlling them. And I think it's really a shame. Well, not a shame. What this Musk situation really brings out from the neoliberal central, you know, faction of the establishment is that it brings out the degree to which they are like deeply hypocritical. So when they have a fit about Elon Musk buying Twitter, and they talk about the need for censorship to ensure democracy, I mean, that's Musk bringing out their actual beliefs. Like, they're really showing what they truly believe. And I think, if anything, that's an interesting development from the Musk situation, is that you have people directly saying that to safeguard democracy, we need more censorship. And I think to anybody with any level of critical thinking, that's absolutely ridiculous, and it's Orwellian and, you know, deeply disturbing. But now we're seeing it just said outright.
Right. I mean, I think the reason, honestly, that a lot of Democrats and liberals, you know, don't really understand the issue, honestly, is because they don't get censored, because, you know, oftentimes they're not really criticizing the power structures within the US or going against the mainstream narratives. So a lot of folks just aren't personally experiencing the censorship and may not even know that it's out there. But my show, my YouTube channel, in the past just like 5 months, I got a warning for election misinformation for reading a patron question to a former Democratic Congresswoman, Cynthia McKinney. Then I got a strike for cyberbullying for a review of the 2018 State of the Union, something that happened 4 years ago, got taken down. And then recently, having Jimmy Dore on, who said essentially things that he says on his own channel all the time, which has 1 million subscribers, he said on my show, and that got removed as medical misinformation. So again, it seems to me, at least, with on YouTube, and again, just, I haven't luckily experienced any censorship around the Ukraine issue, but obviously, RT got disappeared, and unfortunately, a lot of people suffered from that. Lee Camp, Abby Martin, Chris Hedges, their work, years and years of work, were just deleted off of YouTube. So it's really tragic what's happening right now. And again, do you think, like, at the very least, the fact that Elon Musk has brought this forward as an issue, that there will be more discussion about it, and maybe that'll kind of push back on some of the censorship that's happening on other websites, and there'll be a broader conversation? Or do you think that, just, given what we've seen with crisis after crisis, moving from COVID to January 6th to Ukraine, that there's just always going to be a force pushing for more online censorship?
Well, there will definitely always be a force pushing for online censorship. That is not going anywhere. And I mean, that's obviously the case in response to Musk, successfully buying Twitter. I think that it remains to be seen how serious Musk is about free speech on Twitter. I think that, there's the possibility that he could be serious, and that he could, reinstate some accounts that have been suspended, that he could allow discourse that is not currently allowed on Twitter. That's a possibility. And if that happens, then I welcome it, despite the fact that he's a billionaire and part of the plutocracy and not somebody that I'm a personal fan of. I think that, I think it's unlikely. I think that, as we were discussing earlier, there would be serious retaliation against that if it were to happen. But it's possible that, at least for a brief time, there could be a reprieve of the censorship to an extent.
I mean, it could also be the case too that it's kind of a way to bring people back into the fold. And, kind of the way that you had, like, Bernie Sanders, for example, who was pitched as like this revolutionary person, but kind of just sheep herded everybody back in the Democratic Party. Because we've seen, Telegram, for example, has seemed to have really taken off over like the last 6 months or so. And a lot of folks have been moving over to Telegram. And again, there's other sites like on the right, like Gab and Getter. And I know Donald Trump launched his own Truth Social. I don't know if it's been characterized as not being that successful. But do you think it may be the case that by allowing for a slightly more free speech, or at least a social media network that's marketed as being free speech, that kind of takes the wind out of the sails of these actual free speech platforms?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's a strong possibility as well. Definitely. I think it's interesting that Jack Dorsey basically endorsed the situation. I think that was a really interesting statement to read. I think, look, I think it's really early, and I don't, there's not really an indication that I can see as to which way this is going to go at this time. I don't think that there's any, Musk has really not said a lot, except that, that I think he said at a TEDx conference that the economics didn't matter to him. He's basically just championed free speech in theory and wanting to get rid of bots. Really basic statements, and none of us really know how that's going to play out in reality. I think it'd be interesting, and again, it reminds me of the kind of the eve of like the Trump inauguration in January 2017, when the establishment was losing its collective mind at just the idea that somebody could, upend the status quo even a little bit. And obviously, Trump didn't do that, but just the idea that even a billionaire, a multimillionaire who's part of the plutocracy might somewhat upend the apple cart was just intolerable. And I think that's what's really interesting about these situations, more so even than the people themselves involved, is their reaction to it.
Well, Elizabeth, I did have one patron question for you. Okay. This comes from America. It's actually two patron questions from American Greg. The first one is, besides calling the DOJ, what should Americans be doing to help spur the release of Julian Assange?
I think posting all over social media as much as you can, calling your own representatives to talk about that. I think, although it can seem really hopeless at times, I think those are a few things we can do. If you can donating to WikiLeaks. Not all of us can do that, but if you can, that's a great thing to do. I think speaking to people in person about it, because I know personally that a lot of people I know are either ambivalent and disconnected from it and just don't care, or they've just bought hook, line, and sinker a lot of the propaganda narratives around Assange. So talking to people, giving them good information, and trying to get them to understand what the Assange case means for all of us, not just for Assange personally, is really important. Like I said, call your representatives, submit letters to the editor, opinions, get on your own social media platforms if you can and speak about it. And I mean, even, putting up stickers. I mean, WikiLeaks, their shop now does sell bumper stickers, putting up stickers wherever you can. I mean, I hate to sound desperate, but those are the things that I know to do. And other than that, just continuing to counter the lies about Assange, where we can. So.
And the second half of that actually was about donations. So you would recommend people donating specifically to WikiLeaks? Is there anywhere else they should be donating?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at Stella Morris, Assange's wife, she has a legal defense fund link as well. That's another place to donate to Assange's legal case specifically. That would be good as well.
Thanks everyone for watching. To see the full interview with Elizabeth Voss, please go to rockfin.com/Primo Radical and become a premium member.